Welcome to my channel. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you. The morning sun had barely lifted over the small town of Willow Creek when Emily Carter pulled her suitcase out of her old red car and looked up at the weathered house on Maple Lane. It was the same home that had once smelled of cinnamon rolls and sawdust, the home that had belonged to her late grandmother. Now, it belonged to Uncle Daniel. He was her father's younger brother. Quiet, thoughtful, and with eyes that always seemed to hold a secret too heavy for words. Emily hadn't seen him in 5 years, not since she was 16, and too young to understand why he'd always looked away a second too long when she smiled. Now, at 21, she was back. "Emily," he said from the porch, voice calm but warm, "you've grown." She smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "And you haven't aged a bit." He chuckled softly, that low, careful sound that seemed to belong to another era. "That's a lie if I ever heard one." Something about his tone made her heart skip, not in a way she could explain, but in the way one feels when a song from the past starts playing unexpectedly. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was intimate. Like the air between them carried things unsaid. The house smelled the same wood polish, coffee, and a faint trace of paint thinner. Uncle Daniel was an artist. He painted landscapes and sold them at weekend fairs. But Emily remembered something else. He painted faces too. Faces of people he never showed anyone. "You can take the guest room," he said, his back to her as he poured coffee. "Or Grandma's room if you'd rather." "I'll take the guest room," she said quickly, though curiosity tugged at her about the other rooms. She sat at the old oak table, watching him move about the kitchen. His sleeves were rolled up, his forearms streaked with dried color, blue, green, a hint of gold. His eyes, deep and unreadable, caught the light for just a second. There it was again, that something. "Still painting?" she asked. "Always," he said. Then, after a pause, "But I don't show the personal ones anymore." "Why not?" He smiled faintly, looking down at his cup. "Because some stories are better left unfinished." The way he said it's distant felt like a secret brushed against her ear. That evening, rain rolled in, soft at first, then heavy enough to rattle the windows. The old house groaned with the sound. Emily sat in the small living room, reading one of her grandmother's old journals. She could hear Daniel's voice faintly from his studio low hums. The scrape of a brush, the sigh of someone lost in memory. Something in her wanted to see. She hesitated, then quietly walked down the hall. The door to the studio was half open, light spilling through. Inside, Daniel stood before a large canvas, his shirt faintly damp from the heat of the lamps. The painting was breathtaking and haunting. It was a portrait of a young woman sitting by a window, her hair loose, her eyes searching through fog. The expression was soft but full of longing. Emily's breath caught as she realized the face looked like hers. She stepped back before he could see her, heart pounding. Why had he painted her? Or was it just someone who resembled her, a memory, perhaps, of someone long gone? When she returned to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something more lived in that painting, something he hadn't meant her to see. Later, over dinner, he seemed different. "You went exploring," he said, not accusingly, but knowingly. Emily froze, just a little. His gaze met hers, steady and calm. "And what did you find?" "Nothing, just a painting." "Ah." He smiled faintly. "The girl by the window." "Yes." He set his fork down, eyes still on her. "She's not finished. She never will be." The words hung there, heavy with emotion she couldn't name. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with memory. She lay awake, thinking about his hands, the careful, deliberate way he painted, the way his eyes spoke when his mouth stayed silent. It wasn't desire, not yet. It was curiosity wrapped in empathy. She wanted to understand him, the man who had hidden parts of himself inside colors and shadows. Around midnight, she heard soft footsteps in the hallway, the creak of a floorboard near her door, then silence. For a long moment, she didn't move. The air was still, almost reverent, and then footsteps retreating. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He made breakfast, asked about her college plans, even teased her about her old habit of adding too much sugar to her coffee. But beneath it all, the tension was there, quiet, steady, undeniable. When she walked past his studio that afternoon, the door was closed. A note was taped to it. "Art is only honest when seen at the right time." She smiled softly. "What does that even mean, Uncle Daniel?" she whispered, but a small part of her, a growing, restless part, already knew. That evening, when he finally invited her inside the studio, she noticed he had turned the canvas around. A new one stood before him. "This one's different," he said. "What's it about?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes soft but unguarded for the first time. "About seeing someone again and realizing they've always been part of what you've painted." Emily felt her throat tighten. "You mean me?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The brush moved, slow and thoughtful, as if it carried everything he couldn't say. And as she stood there watching him, she realized that behind those quiet eyes were years of unspoken stories, and, maybe, just maybe, one of them was about her. The morning after Daniel had begun his new painting, Emily awoke to the faint scent of rain on the wood floors and the sound of him humming softly downstairs. It was the same melody he used to play when she was a child, something wistful and almost unfinished. Like the tune itself had been waiting for her to return. She pulled on her sweater and walked down the creaky stairs. The kitchen was warm with light. Daniel stood by the stove, cooking eggs, a paintbrush still tucked behind one ear. "You don't take a break even when you cook, do you?" Emily teased. He smiled over his shoulder. "Creativity doesn't keep office hours." She laughed lightly, settling into the chair at the small oak table. There was something comforting about mornings here, quiet but full of meaning. Even the way Daniel poured coffee felt deliberate, graceful, and full of thought. But the calm was deceptive. Beneath it, Emily could still feel that undercurrent of something more, the same energy that had filled the air when she saw her own reflection in his painting. After breakfast, Daniel said, "If you have time, I could use your help sorting through Grandma's attic. Some of her things might be useful for my next project." Emily agreed, partly out of nostalgia, partly out of curiosity. The attic smelled like old cedar and forgotten time. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light spilling through the small window. They worked side by side, opening boxes filled with letters, faded quilts, and black and white photos. "Look," Emily said softly, holding up a picture of a young woman standing beside a lake. Her hair blew across her face, and her smile was the kind that made you wonder what she was thinking. Daniel took the photograph, his fingers brushing hers. He stared at it for a long time. "That was your grandmother," he said quietly. "Before she married your grandfather, she used to paint too." Emily tilted her head. "You got it from her, then?" "The art," he nodded, "and maybe the habit of hiding behind it." She watched his face, the lines of memory etched there. "You mean hiding feelings and colors?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "Something like that." For a moment, the attic felt smaller, like the air had thickened between them. That evening, rain clouds gathered again. The house dimmed early, and Emily sat by the living room fire while Daniel disappeared into his studio. The sound of soft classical music drifted from down the hall. She tried to read, but her eyes kept straying to the closed studio door. She thought about the new painting, the one he'd started after turning her portrait around. What was he painting now? Why had he said it was different? When the music finally stopped, curiosity got the better of her. She stood, walked quietly toward the door, and listened. Inside, she could hear him talking to himself in a low voice. "Too much light on the edge," he murmured. "She's not just sunlight, she's the space between shadow and dawn." Emily's breath caught. Was he painting her again? Before she could think twice, she knocked gently. The sound startled him. He turned the knob and opened the door. Surprise flickering across his face, but not anger. "Sorry," she said softly. "I just wondered if you needed anything." He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You can come in." The room was full of that heady scent of oil paint and turpentine. Lamps glowed against canvases, and in the center of the room stood a painting still wet with color. It wasn't a portrait this time. It was a landscape, but with something deeply emotional about it. A woman stood at the edge of a lake, her back turned to the viewer. Her hair was loose, drifting like smoke in the wind. The sky above her was divided, half golden morning, half dusky twilight. "She's looking for something," Emily whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "She's waiting for something, too." "It's beautiful," she said, stepping closer. "But she feels lonely." He looked at her then, eyes full of quiet honesty. "Maybe that's because I painted her from memory." Emily turned toward him, confused. "From memory? You mean someone you knew?" Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening slightly. "Someone I cared about once. Someone who saw me before I became who I am now." The sadness in his tone made her heart ache. She wanted to ask more, but something told her not to pry. Instead, she said softly, "You still carry her in your art." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe I paint her because I never said goodbye." There was silence then, the kind that feels full, not empty. Over the next few days, their rhythm fell into an easy routine, mornings filled with coffee and soft conversation, afternoons spent sorting through the attic or tending to Grandma's overgrown garden. Daniel opened up slowly, sharing stories of his younger years, of how he left art school because it started teaching me to forget how to feel. Emily listened, drawn not just to his words, but to the way he said them with sincerity, restraint, and something like longing. One evening, as they watered the garden together under the fading orange light, Emily said, "You know, I used to think grown-ups didn't feel things deeply. Now I think they just get better at hiding it." Daniel looked at her with that quiet smile of his. "You're wiser than most grown-ups I know." She laughed softly. "You make it sound like I'm still a kid." "You're not," he said. "Not anymore." Something in the way he said it made the air between them still. Neither spoke after that. That night, Emily sat awake again, looking out at the rain streaking the window. She could see the faint light glowing from under the studio door. For a moment, she thought about how strange it felt, being drawn to someone she'd known her whole life, yet realizing she didn't truly know him at all. But it wasn't forbidden or inappropriate, it was human. It was the recognition of two lonely hearts meeting in the quiet places between words. She didn't go to him, she simply let the moment exist. When she awoke the next morning, the studio door was ajar. A small note rested on the kitchen table beside her coffee mug. "Some portraits aren't of people, they're of moments that changed us." Below it, a small sketch, a simple pencil outline of a girl standing by a window, sunlight spilling across her face, taught her that evening, when Daniel returned from town. She met his eyes with a question she didn't need to ask. He smiled, a slow knowing smile. "You found it." "I did," she whispered. "It's beautiful." "It's not finished," he said softly. "Not yet. And for reasons she couldn't explain." Emily felt that maybe neither was she. The third morning in Willow Creek began with a hush. Mist rolled over the fields, softening everything it touched. Emily stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching droplets slide down the glass. For the first time since arriving, she felt calm but also curious, as if the quiet itself was keeping a secret from her. Downstairs, Daniel's voice drifted through the hall. He was on the phone, speaking low. She caught fragments. "Yes, I still have them." "No, she doesn't know yet." Then silence. When he hung up, she stepped away from the stairs before he noticed she'd heard Dot at breakfast. He looked thoughtful, his eyes shadowed but kind. "I'm driving into town this afternoon," he said. "There's a small gallery showing some of Grandma's old sketches. You should come." Emily's face lit up. "She has sketches in a gallery." He smiled faintly. "A few. I promised her years ago I'd share them someday. I guess today's the day." The drive to town was quiet but comfortable. Maple trees lined the road, their leaves a blur of red and gold. The air smelled like rain and wood smoke. Emily watched Daniel's profile as he drove, the calm steadiness of his hands, the slight furrow in his brow when he thought too much. At the gallery, old photographs of local artists covered the walls. Daniel led her to a small corner where 3 of her grandmother's sketches hung in simple wooden frames. They were delicate drawings of a young woman sitting by a lake, sunlight scattering across the water. "She looks familiar," Emily said softly. Daniel's gaze lingered on the drawings. "That's because she was modeled after someone Grandma loved deeply. She never told anyone his name, just said he had eyes that carried storms." Emily smiled. "Sounds like someone I know." He glanced at her, half amused, half uncertain. "You mean me?" She shrugged playfully, but her cheeks warmed. "You do have that same look sometimes." After the gallery, they walked along the lake behind the building, the same lake from the sketches. The water rippled with the wind, silver and blue under the cloudy sky. "You miss her, don't you?" Emily asked. Daniel nodded. "Your grandmother was the strongest person I knew. She raised your father and me after our parents passed. She taught me to see beauty in broken things." He paused, picking up a smooth stone. "I disappointed her once. She asked me to paint honestly, to paint what I felt, but I hid behind technique and perfection instead. I was afraid of showing too much." Emily watched him toss the stone into the lake. "Maybe that's what art is supposed to do, make us feel too much." He smiled quietly. "You sound like her." The wind lifted her hair, brushing it across her face. For a second, he reached as if to move it aside, then stopped himself. The restraint made the moment even softer, charged not with desire, but with unspoken care. That evening, rain returned. The power flickered twice before finally going out. The house was wrapped in darkness, lit only by the faint glow of Daniel's lantern. "I guess we're back in Grandma's time," Emily joked. He laughed lightly. Then we'll do what she did, sit by the fire and tell stories. They settled in the living room, the lantern between them. Outside, thunder rolled like a slow drum. Tell me something true, she said. Daniel hesitated. All right, when I was 25, I fell in love with someone I couldn't keep. Emily's breath caught. What happened? She was an artist too. Brilliant, wild. We painted together for months. But she left, said I loved my work more than I loved her. Maybe she was right. He looked into the lantern light, his eyes distant. After that, I stopped painting people. Every face felt like hers. Emily listened, heart heavy. Is that why you paint landscapes now? Maybe. Landscapes don't leave. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the rain whispering against the roof. Then Emily said softly, maybe some people come back just in a different form. He looked at her then, and something wordless passed between them, a shared understanding that neither could explain. Later that night, when the rain softened to a drizzle, Emily couldn't sleep. The house hummed with quiet. She walked down the hall and saw the door to the studio open just a crack. Inside, Daniel sat before a canvas, sketching by candlelight. His expression was calm, but his eyes looked alive in a way she hadn't seen before. She stepped closer. You're painting again? He turned slightly. Couldn't sleep. The storm brings color to mind. Can I see? He nodded, moving aside. On the canvas was a scene of the lake from earlier, but this time, the woman wasn't facing away. She was looking forward, standing in the rain, her eyes open to the storm. It was powerful, free, full of movement. She's different, Emily whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. She finally stopped waiting. Emily swallowed. You mean you stopped waiting? He met her gaze. Maybe both of us did. The candlelight flickered, throwing soft gold over the wet paint. For a heartbeat, they just looked at each other, two souls quietly learning to breathe again. The next morning, the rain cleared, leaving the world washed clean. Emily went for a walk along the edge of the property, the air fresh and cool. She thought about what Daniel had said, about loving someone you couldn't keep, about painting to remember instead of to move on. When she returned, she found a small envelope on the kitchen table. Her name was written in Daniel's careful handwriting. Inside was a folded letter and a single charcoal sketch, the same woman from the painting. Standing in the rain, the letter read, You once asked me why I paint faces I never show. It's because I paint the people who teach me to see again. Your grandmother did. So did that woman by the lake. And now you do. You remind me that art is not about what we hide, but about what we dare to feel. Emily held the letter to her chest, her eyes stinging. For the first time since her arrival, she understood what connected them. It wasn't romance. It was recognition, the meeting of two hearts that had both known silence too long. That evening, Daniel found her on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the trees. I didn't mean to embarrass you with that note, he said softly. You didn't, she replied. It just made me realize how much art can heal people. He nodded. It heals me too. They sat together as the last light faded, the sky turning to velvet blue. No more secrets, no unspoken tension, just peace. Emily smiled. So, will you finish the painting? Daniel looked out toward the horizon. Yes, but not tonight. Some paintings deserve one more sunrise. The next morning began with a quiet stillness. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world so clear it almost felt unreal. Dew clung to every blade of grass, and the air carried that fresh scent of new beginnings. Emily awoke early, her thoughts circling around the letter Daniel had left her the night before. His words, gentle, reflective, almost trembling, had touched something deep inside her. For the first time, she felt seen, not as the curious niece who wandered into family history, but as someone who inspired something real. Downstairs, she heard soft music, piano notes, drifting from the old record player. Daniel was in the kitchen, already brewing coffee. He looked up when she entered, his smile quiet but warm. Morning, early bird. Morning, she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You were up late again. He nodded, handing her a mug. I started finishing the painting. It's almost done. Her heart fluttered. Can I see it? Not yet, he said, almost teasing. I want it to dry first, and there's something I still need to add. She tilted her head, intrigued. What's missing? He hesitated. You'll see tonight. The day unfolded slowly, with the peaceful rhythm of a small-town morning. Emily spent time exploring the attic, discovering old journals, photographs, and handwritten notes from her grandmother. The scent of dust and old paper filled the space, but it didn't feel forgotten, it felt preserved. Like every box was a whisper from the past waiting to be heard. She found one. photograph that made her pause, a picture of her grandmother standing beside two young men. One was her father, smiling, holding a paintbrush. The other was Daniel, years younger, eyes bright and filled with that same quiet fire she still saw in him now. On the back, written in neat cursive, were the words, "Art binds what time tries to separate." Emily ran her fingers over the faded ink. It was like her grandmother had knew that years later, the same bond would bring them together again, through art, through memory, through something neither could explain. That evening, when the golden light of sunset filled the living room, Daniel called her into the studio. He stood by the canvas, now dry, covered with a light cloth. The air smelled faintly of paint and pine. "Before I show you," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Emily's pulse quickened. He took a deep breath. "Your grandmother's last wish was that I pass something on to you when you were ready. Not just her paintings, but what she called her unfinished heart. She said you'd understand it one day." Emily frowned gently. Her unfinished heart. Daniel nodded. She meant the emotion she never got to express, the love she carried for someone she could never be with. She poured it into her art. Every line, every shadow. She believed one day, you'd see it for what it truly was. He lifted the cloth from the painting. Emily gasped. It was the same woman from before, standing by the lake, but now the scene was transformed. The rain had stopped. Light broke through the clouds, scattering across the water like shards of gold. The woman's face was serene, eyes open, hand outstretched toward the light. But what caught Emily's breath was the reflection in the lake, another figure. Faint, but unmistakable. It was Daniel. Her eyes filled. "You painted yourself?" He nodded. "Because that's what she saw in me when I was young, someone who could carry her art forward. I realized the story wasn't just about her lost love. It was about the people she left her heart with, you and me." Emily's voice trembled. "She connected us before we even knew it." Daniel looked at her, his expression tender but restrained. "She always believed love doesn't end, it transforms. Into memory, into art, into the next heartbeat that understands." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the painting glowing softly under the lantern light. It felt alive, breathing between them. Emily whispered, "It's beautiful." He smiled faintly. "It's hers. And yours now." She blinked away tears. "Mine." Daniel nodded. "She left this house, her journals, and her art in your name. I only kept it until you came. I think she knew it would mean more to you when you were old enough to see beyond the paint." Emily pressed her hand over her heart. "I don't know what to say." "Just promise me you'll keep painting," he said quietly. "You have her gift. Don't let it fade like I almost did." She looked at him then, really looked, the man who had carried her grandmother's legacy, who had lived quietly in the shadow of memories, and who was now offering it all back to her. "Daniel," she said softly, "you didn't just keep it, you kept her alive." He smiled, his voice almost a whisper. "Maybe that's what love really means, not possession, but preservation." Later that night, after dinner, they sat outside under a sky sprinkled with stars. The cool air carried the scent of pine and rain-soaked soil. Fireflies danced along the edge of the garden. Emily leaned back, eyes half closed. "You ever think she's still here, watching?" Daniel looked up at the stars. "Every time I paint, every time I breathe." They shared a quiet laugh, one of those soft, unspoken laughs that come from deep understanding. Then, he turned to her. "Tomorrow, the local art council's coming to see the piece. They want to feature it in their annual exhibit." Her eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "They want you there too." "As her granddaughter, and as my co-artist," she echoed. He smiled. "You finished what I couldn't. You gave the painting its soul." The words filled her chest with warmth she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, admiration, maybe something deeper. As the night grew still, Emily stood to go inside, but before she did, she looked back at him sitting under the starlight. That quiet strength in his eyes again. "I used to think those eyes hid secrets," she said softly. "Now I think they just hold too many memories." Daniel's smile was faint, wistful. "Memories can be heavy, unless you share them." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll help you carry them." And with that, she went inside, leaving him alone beneath the stars. His heart fuller than it had been in years. But as she reached her room, something stopped her. The faint sound of the piano drifted through the hall, not from the record player this time, but played by hand. She followed it quietly, stopping at the doorway to see Daniel at the old upright piano, playing a melody she'd never heard before. It was gentle, aching, beautiful. She watched silently, realizing the truth. Behind his quiet strength wasn't just grief, it was devotion, long-lasting and endless. and she wasn't sure anymore whether the art had brought them together, or something even greater. Morning light crept softly into the old farmhouse, turning the curtains a pale gold. For the first time in years, Daniel's home didn't feel like a place frozen in memory, it felt alive. The smell of fresh paint still lingered faintly in the air. Mixed with coffee and sunlight, Emily stood at the window, watching the fields shimmer under the early light. In just a few hours, the art council would arrive to view her grandmother's painting, their painting. She could hardly believe how far things had come since that first foggy morning. When she'd stepped off the train, downstairs, Daniel was already dressed, adjusting his jacket in front of the mirror. His calm demeanor didn't hide the quiet excitement in his eyes. "You ready?" he asked when she appeared on the stairs. "As I'll ever be," she said with a soft laugh, though her heart beat fast. They drove into town together, the silence between them comfortable and warm. The trees lining the road were beginning to lose their leaves, a sign that autumn was slowly giving way to something new. The gallery in Willow Creek buzzed with low voices when they arrived. Soft classical music played in the background as guests moved between the art pieces, wine glasses in hand. The painting "The Woman by the Lake" stood in the center of the main wall, surrounded by gentle lighting that made it glow like something living. Emily's breath caught all over again when she saw it displayed there. The colors seemed even more vibrant, the emotion even more alive. The reflection of Daniel in the water, the woman reaching for the light, it told their story. But it also told her grandmother's. One of the curators, a kind woman in her 50s, approached them. "You must be Daniel and Emily. This piece, it's breathtaking. There's something eternal about it." Daniel smiled humbly. "It's her work. We just helped her finish it." The curator tilted her head. "Well, whoever she was, she must have loved deeply. You can feel it in every brushstroke." Emily's eyes glistened. "Yes," she whispered, "she really did." As the evening unfolded, people gathered around to ask questions about the inspiration, the story, the meaning. Emily spoke gently, explaining her grandmother's legacy and Daniel's role in keeping it alive. Each word seemed to draw them closer, their bond visible in the way they glanced at one another, quietly proud, quietly grateful. After the crowd thinned, Daniel stepped aside to speak with the gallery owner. Emily wandered toward the back wall, where a small plaque had been placed beside the painting. It read, "Dedicated to the one who taught us to see beauty in silence. Art is not what we create, it's what we continue." As she read the words, she felt a lump rise in her throat. The message wasn't just about her grandmother, it was about all of them. When the event ended and the guests began leaving, Daniel and Emily stayed behind, sitting in the quiet gallery after the lights dimmed. The world outside was dark, but the painting still glowed under the soft spotlight. "She would have been proud of you," Daniel said finally. Emily smiled faintly. "I think she would have been proud of you too." He looked at her, his expression gentle but thoughtful. "You know, when your grandmother passed, I thought I'd lost the part of myself that believed in connection. I kept painting, but it was all technique, no heart. Then you came here, and somehow, it was like she sent you to remind me that art and love don't really die." Emily met his gaze. "You reminded me too. I came here to learn about her. Instead, I learned about myself." They both smiled softly, a silence full of meaning settling between them. Outside, rain began to fall lightly again, tapping against the glass doors. Emily stood and walked closer to the window. "It's like the first day I came," she said. "Fog and rain. Like the world wants to start over." Daniel joined her, standing just close enough for their shoulders to almost touch. "Maybe it is starting over," he said quietly. "For both of us." She turned to him then. The way he looked at her, steady, kind, vulnerable, felt like the final brushstroke to everything they'd shared. "Daniel," she said softly, "what happens now?" He smiled. "Whatever you choose. The house is yours, the art, the studio, everything she left behind. But more than that, you have a gift. You should use it." Emily hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll stay for a while," he said. "Keep the studio running, help set up the foundation we talked about. After that, maybe I'll finally take that trip to Italy your grandmother always wanted me to take." She laughed quietly. "You should, she'd love that." They looked at each other one last time before turning back to the painting, the reflection of the two figures in the glass side by side, under the painted sky, seemed almost poetic. A week later, Emily packed her things. The exhibit had been a success, and the gallery requested to keep the painting for an extended display. She stood in the old farmhouse one last time, taking in the scent of wood, paint, and the faint memory of rain. Daniel helped load the last of her boxers into the car. When they stood by the porch, he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" she asked. He smiled. "Something unfinished." She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a blank canvas with a single painted line across it, soft blue, the color of the lake. "It's yours to complete," he said. "Whatever you paint next, let it come from what you feel, not what you think people expect." Emily's eyes shimmered. "Thank you for everything." He nodded. "No, thank you. You brought light back into this house." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, it was full. Then she smiled, and he did too, and it felt like goodbye and beginning all at once. As she drove away, the fields of Willow Creek stretched endlessly under the morning sun. The world seemed larger, brighter. She thought of her grandmother's words, the unfinished heart, and how sometimes love doesn't end, it just changes form. When she glanced in the rearview mirror, she saw Daniel on the porch, a hand lifted in quiet farewell. The farmhouse behind him glowed in the sunlight, no longer haunted, but alive. Emily smiled, a tear slipping free. She whispered, "Some secrets aren't meant to be hidden, they're meant to be painted in light." And as the road curved toward the horizon, she knew the next canvas she touched would tell a story not just of art, but of everything she'd found in that quiet house: longing, healing, connection, and a love that lived beyond words. The end.